Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me. This is Calvin, your host of the Crypto Drip podcast. This week, Goose and I talk about Oracle pools, TCD again, and just about what we've been doing over the last week. If you like these podcast episodes, please let us know in the comments and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thecryptodrip. And you can also sign up to become a premium member of the Crypto Drip community by going to thecryptodrip.com/join. All right, let's get into it. Good evening, Goose. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, dude. Good Saturday all around. Not as good as yours, though. You went to the lake today with the family, so how was that?
I did. It was awesome. It was kind of, I was not expecting much, to be honest, not because my family isn't awesome. They are awesome. But because it was kind of stormy and a little rainy. And I was like, man, it was like 100 and something degrees 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And, we decided to go to, not really a lake. It's kind of like a reservoir. It was awesome because it wasn't too hot, and but it was just hot. It was like 85 or just close to 90. So it was like
Perfect.
we could just sit out on the sand and not like completely roast.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Well, that's good, dude. Like, times like this, like where the market's just kind of consolidating, accumulating, whatever you want to call it, like getting out and just being outside is just such a good breather away from, everything.
Yeah,
Getting
it
away
is.
from the screens in general, especially you, like whose day job outside of, TCD and, being on Twitter and investing and the cryptocurrency market of all things, like getting outside is super healthy and definitely a priority people should be taking up at, very boring times like this. Well, not so boring because Bitcoin looks like it's ramping up. Where do you see this going for a little bit?
I feel like I have, so the recent dip, I think it's probably around 50%.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's my first dip, my first major dip. And I don't feel like a lot of people actually realize this. Like, I got into crypto last year, so I am fresh, dude. And I probably talk like I know a lot about crypto, but that's just because I'm opinionated. So,
Right.
but like, yeah, I feel like I have a little bit of, I don't want to say PTSD because I mean, come on, it's not really, but it was not fun going through so many like ups and downs over the last couple months. And
Yeah.
I've had 2 or 3 times where I was like, oh, we're coming back.
I know.
And then it just get like hammered. So, but it's been what, like 10 days?
Yeah, I think this will be the 11th candle, yeah. Or we just
of
closed.
green. Yeah.
Yeah, so this will be the 11th today. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's looking good, dude. We just closed the monthly candle, which was nice, and we closed it in the blue. We engulfed a bunch of these, downwards trending monthlies, which was awesome. If we close tomorrow, this Sunday, this weekly close looks gorgeous. And, I think Bitcoin's going to do its own thing. I don't know really, like, for one, especially after let's look at this. Yeah, 10-day move. Like, what really happens? We haven't really done that more than a handful of times in the history of Bitcoin. So, if we keep going up, I see some consolidation here. I don't know how altcoins are going to react. But Bitcoin's looking strong. This was a much needed reversal, I think. And we'll see where we go from here. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's definitely more of a positive trend than the previous times, and the previous times were kind of invalidated after 2 days.
Yeah.
So
100%. This was definitely like reversal energy, like coming back from the very lows of like the 29s, 30s. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of what you said, right? One of your Monday market updates on the cryptodrip.com, I think back was it in May or June? You were like, summer's going to be kind of brutal, and then we'll pick back up at the end.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Like, one, like we have the whole grayscale thing. If you read the article, you understand that, like, very Bitcoin specific phenomenon. Two, you have like just an investing sort of, ideology that's been apparent throughout history. Like the summer months are very slow, boring. Quarter two in terms of, corporations' earnings are usually slow.
Yeah.
So there you have your, like overall investing theme. So I was just kind of putting two together, and then you have even like the 4-year trends, like even 2017's run up July or June, July, and a little bit of May, like sprinkled in, had a very considerable dip within the broader bull cycle. So, I mean, it was just kind of, it wasn't obvious, obviously, but like, you just get used to like recognizing that there are going to be some slow months, but really like grasping the exponentiality of what this broader cycle is doing is the hard part, right? Like the numbers all seem big in linear forms, but when you start to look at, kind of the trajectory of the market in terms of like a technology like network effects and technology adoption, like things start to get pretty crazy and hard to believe. So that's what makes it hard. But people are starting to pick up to that. The more that people do, the more burgeoning asset class like Bitcoin, like cryptocurrencies in general, starts to pick up steam, and we start to get a better foothold on like, just the broader economic landscape.
So in our past episode, if you haven't heard, we basically unveiled like kind of our plans for a DAO, and how do we move from like here to the Crypto Drip DAO, but also like a platform that kind of decentralizes content creation in the crypto space. And so, Goose and I were talking just recently before this call. Maybe we should do like an ongoing, like every episode we do a quick update on the behind the scenes things, like, tokenomics, platform, like what kind of software stack are we doing, all that kind of stuff. And so if you guys, especially on YouTube, if you dig that idea, let us know in the comments. And we'll make that a staple. But yeah, in terms of what have I done since our last episode? I mean, I did a lot of research into kind of like, there's two kind of components to the Crypto Drip platform as it compares to right now. And the first one is the CMS. What are we going to use for the content management system? Because especially if you create an organization with a lot of content creators, they need a way to be able to easily publish their data, right?
Right.
So that's kind of like the first one. The second one is how are we going to present all that content to people in a way that users, it's easy to navigate, the site is fast, all that stuff that matter, SEO, blah, blah.
Right.
So I've been kind of like doing some research just on, what are the best stacks? And I think we kind of landed, there's a couple, for the CMS side, I think I'm leaning very heavily towards Statamic, which is kind of it's a very open content modeling CMS that kind of lets you create all sorts of content in a way that I think would grow flexibly with TCD as it grows and as content creators come in. And then for the front end, I think we're leaning towards Next.js, which is just, it's a very modern stack that allows for pretty much us to do anything we want. I mean, nice. Honestly, and it can port over into a mobile app in the future if we want to build some iOS and Android apps. We could use those same user interface elements. So that's kind of where I'm at currently. And then I started kind of working on a roadmap, just kind of better detailing like what the vision is. I created a couple of repos on GitHub for the CMS and for the front end. And it was interesting. One of our community members commented on there like, oh, now I think I know where you're going with this. And I was like, shoot, maybe I'm not explaining this very well. So I think a roadmap is really going to help the community kind of understand what steps we need to take to get to where we're thinking, because there's a lot of steps we have to take. I mean, we're completely centralized right now. So there's a lot of,
for sure,
where do we have to go to get from where we are now to where the community actually votes for the content that they want. We have to cross an ocean to get there.
Yeah,
so
definitely. I do want to get into, you just published a article this past week on Wednesday, as a part of our deep dives that we do for TCD. That one is free to the public. It was on Oracle pools, and I wanted to kind of go over that with you. I gave it a read. It was super interesting, dude. Super good job writing that. One thing that popped up in my mind was a new concept that you have pretty much coined. Let's call it token, truth market, and
Yeah.
how one would be able to value a market like that, and how it would be able to be a market in its own. Could you elaborate a little bit on this truth market concept?
So oracles in general, in case our listeners don't know what that means, it's kind of a blockchain idea of decentralizing data feeds that happen outside of the blockchain and providing them to dApps that run inside the blockchain. And this article was on Oracle pools in particular. And the whole idea of like a truth market, like it's kind of a catch-22 because decentralizing information isn't actually truth, right? Like it's more coming to a reliable source of consensus, right?
Right.
And what happens is like you could have a whole group of the masses basically believe a lie, and that would make it onto the blockchain, right? As long as enough people believed it. So the whole idea of like a truth market is kind of a joke. But I do think that like
Awesome.
I'm just
I was
I'm
very
just
excited.
you're just wrong. There is no truth market. No,
I was very
That's not
excited
really-
for this entirely new asset class, and I was like, it's gonna be so good.
Well, okay, so I think it is, right? I think, let me put it this way. People, and I don't know how this currently works, but the average person just trusts another party, right? For most users, we find centralized authorities in our society that act as like kind of basically our oracles. I mean, I actually said that in the article that
Right.
oracles take many, many shapes and forms in society. Right. And right now it's mostly centralized institutions. Like, you can think of government departments. You can think of even like school teachers are oracles in their own right. But they're all centralized. They're all kind of like, there's a certain amount of trust that you have to assign to this person or institution. And they're usually like selfishly motivated. There's a lot of opportunity for agendas within these oracles.
Right.
And it's usually because they're people. So the concept of like an oracle pool decentralizing truth for like the modern age, because blockchain's immutable, because you can't change it, because the information is stored always.
Right.
And because like in the concept of oracle pools, it's public data. It's almost like a public good. And this differs a little bit from like other oracle solutions out there. But the whole idea is that it lives on the blockchain. That data is stored on the blockchain as a transaction, and anybody can look at that information. So this idea of a truth market, I think, kind of comes to light when, how much would you pay to get the most decentralized?
I was going to say, from reading the article and hearing what you are saying, like there really isn't a possibility of absolute truth, because everybody's going to carry their own bias, and that's going to take form in the way that they, project information for other people onto other people, et cetera. But you're saying with the checks and balances allowed through blockchain, we get closer and closer to the goal of absolute truth, realizing that unlike perfection, we'll never really reach it. And basically just saying, how much do you value the closest thing to the absolute truth? Am I kind of on track there?
Yeah. And I think like a good example, and, I hate to bring up sticky topics, but this is just kind of like, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Is in these controversial topics where people have differing opinions, or they have differing data to support their opinion, right? And it's just like this ongoing war online, and there's not necessarily an aggregation of that data. And if it is aggregated, it's aggregated through a centralized institution to where half the population already decides, well, that's invalid because of this, and that, and because I don't like that. I don't like the New York Times or whatever.
Right.
So the example is vaccines. So controversial, especially with COVID. Because it's so new, you have almost the same amount of information saying that the COVID vaccines are effective as you do information saying that they're not effective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how do you decide? Like, you could do your own research, as people always say, but that leads you down this rabbit hole of taking on the burden of doing all the research yourself. And a lot of us are not epidemiologists, or we're not like, we don't have a scientific background to be able to make an educated decision like that.
Right.
So there has to be some offloading of that trust. And I think Oracle pools provide a trustless way to do that with the most decentralized, balanced consensus among people within that blockchain network to come to a conclusion. So you could say, like, let's just say if we live in a society where there's a truth market and there's a lot of money in that truth market, people are incentivized to provide the right data or accurate data. And then it's a lot more trustworthy without having to rely on a central institution.
No, I mean, it's an interesting concept, and it's obviously, like, in the broader view of things, like, it's something that, less than 0.5% of the people are even aware of or talking about. So in the article, you mentioned a comparison between Chainlink, which is running on Ethereum. It's sort of held back or hindered by Ethereum's accounting model, which is an account-based model. And then you kind of draw out comparisons between how Oracle pools would be run on Ergo or Cardano on the EUTXO model or the extended UTXO model. I just wanted to see if you would elaborate on kind of the differences there and why Cardano and Ergo have a leg up in terms of using the EUTXO model over the account model.
I don't know if a leg up is the right term. And I'll preface this by saying, like, I would refer to myself as a student of blockchain, not a blockchain expert. Right. So, I feel like I have to put in the disclaimer that I could be totally wrong here. But the way that I understand it is that, so the two accounting models, just to define them, is the accounting model, it operates like a bank. So you have an account number and you have a certain ledger of assets that belong into that account. And when you make deposits and withdrawals, there's not like, you only take what you need out of that account. The EUTXO model is just an extension of the UTXO model, which is unspent transaction outputs. And in this accounting model, it's just like an account address has control over any number of these UTXOs. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you don't actually have like an account balance. You more have a bunch of UTXOs that you own. And within these UTXOs, there's a balance. So let's say on like Cardano, let's say I have 500 ADA. I might have 100 ADA in one UTXO and 400 ADA in another UTXO. And my account has permission to spend those transactions. The difference is that it consumes the whole transaction. So if I were to send 50 ADA to you, it would take, let's say it would spend the 100 transactions or the 100 UTXO, and it would spend all of that, and it would create two new outputs, one with 50 ADA that you control and one with 50 ADA that I control. And so that's kind of how UTXO differs from account-based. And it's a lot more flexible, I suppose is the right term.
Right. So that's what I was going to get into. So in terms of Oracle pools, what makes the UTXO model functionality more flexible?
Yeah. So I think in the accounting model on Ethereum, and let's take Chainlink, for instance, they heavily rely on smart contracts to deliver their data. So let's say a data request comes in, there's an Oracle pool running in it's smart contract, and all these Oracle providers submit data to it, and it spits it back out. An Oracle pool on a UTXO model, kind of like Cardano or like Ergo, it basically allows anybody to create a transaction, and because you can assign metadata into that transaction, you don't actually need like a smart contract there. Because you could do that, you can post that and reference the Oracle pool's parent transaction as a way to tie all of these UTXOs together. And then the Oracle pool basically spends a final transaction with the aggregated data of all these UTXOs all together. The flexibility here is that you don't actually, like, anybody can participate in that, but it can also, like, you could stack Oracle pools on top of each other, for instance. So you could have an Oracle pool that provides the price of Bitcoin, okay?
Right.
And you have like 5 Oracle pools in that spending transactions, and it goes and it basically gets finalized as a transaction onto the Cardano blockchain. This is also where the public good comes from, because it's a transaction on the actual ledger. You can read that data point, whereas like on Chainlink, it lives inside of a smart contract, and you can't really read that data.
Interesting.
Right. So
Right.
So let's just say you have that first Oracle pool. Now let's say there's like 5 independent Oracle pools, all providing that data. You can have another Oracle pool on top that aggregates the final transaction of all those Oracle pools, and you get another level of decentralization.
Interesting. Also another level of checks and balances and making sure
Right.
that data is, correct.
Mm-hmm. And actually, like, because there's a reference between all these UTXOs, the higher up the level could actually charge more for higher assurance, but then it pays all the Oracle pools below it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's
So
I like that.
and the difference with like Chainlink is like it's all its own DAO, right?
Mhm.
Whereas the UTXO model on Cardano and Ergo, it's actually just a native like public good. It lives on the blockchain. They can have the Oracle pool could have its own like mini DAO is a term that I've heard, but they're not necessarily tied to like this single Oracle framework. They all use the blockchain kind of with
Very
its own
interesting.
native capabilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
So say, right, like there are these mini ecosystems or mini DAOs for these decentralized pools, these Oracle pools. But is there like a protocol blanket layer that's governing the rule sets for them? Like, is there is the governance within like the mini DAO, or is the governance a blanket layer, like I was saying?
Yeah, no, the governance would be a mini DAO. It would be
Wow,
within the Oracle pool itself. So for instance,
that's crazy.
you can kind of think of it like a mining pool, right? Like
Right.
each mining pool is completely separate to itself, but they operate on a native layer. They pay out in their tokens or whatever, in the
Very
native token.
interesting.
But you could actually create an Oracle pool where like, hey, we're going to have our own token. We're going to pay all of our Oracle providers in that token for posting transactions with the data feed. And then you can also have like you can still do on demand, that happens in a smart contract or on a sidechain where,
Right.
a user might ping it. But the benefit too of this is like, because it's a public good, it's very, 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 very cheap for the end user to get that data request. Whereas right now on Chainlink, I think it costs, I'm not gonna spit something out, but it's more expensive.
Right. So you're getting added decentralization. You're getting added checks and balances, filters, aka like more fine-tuned data or off-chain, bridging to on-chain.
Yeah.
But you're also
And I think-
getting it as an added bonus for a cheaper cost.
Right. And it's also like it's the complete history of that data is available for anybody because the blockchain's public.
Right. So then now
So-
we can branch out into other things besides just, pricing of Bitcoin, like having that sort of like global state of all the data points that a pool is provided. Then you can also have further like, again, like checks and balances for other people in terms of like, sports betting, or like you were saying, some of the other avenues for what oracles could provide.
Yep.
Very
And
interesting.
there's also something to be said here too, like anybody could actually post a transaction with this data. So you wouldn't necessarily need to have, like, for instance, you could have, whether or not this is practical, but technically it's possible to have a group, like the audience be the referee, where they post,
Right.
you decentralize. Obviously you wouldn't do that, but I'm just saying that that's possible because all you have to do is spend something with some metadata. You would just spend a transaction fee.
Yeah. So at some point, like Cardano, you could spin up an Oracle pool for Cardano. I don't know how they're going to weave that in, maybe with stake pool operators. But you could have an Oracle pool for, voting outcomes or hotel travel prices, like you were saying. Yeah, that's super interesting.
And I mean, it's worth pointing out, like, you can do that on Chainlink. It's just, it's a little bit more, I think it lives inside of a tighter lane. And that's not always necessarily a bad thing, but it's also, they also have to deal with high gas prices. And
definitely. Then you got the whole blockchain network to deal with.
Yeah, but that's also something that Chainlink is actually blockchain agnostic. It's just their link token is on Ethereum.
Yep. Yeah, I did. Dude, that article is awesome, and I do like reading all of your more technical stuff. It's very contrast.
Yeah, I mean,
my very finance.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it took me a month to write that article, and I still, like, if it's not already painfully obvious, like, I still probably understand maybe 25% of the underlying, like, technical capabilities, but also, like, what does that actually mean? Like, I was talking to somebody on Twitter recently who's insanely smart, but they talk about, use cases for this, like ride sharing or like, routing or whatever, like basically almost a sharing economy within that, of sharing data through an Oracle pool. It's just really fascinating stuff. And then the whole idea of like a truth market, there'd be a lot of money in more and more levels of decentralization, more and more levels of aggregation to get the most accurate data possible.
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely heading to a world more like that.
I actually want to hear about the Paperbyte you're working on right now. So first, tell us what a Paperbyte is for our YouTube subscribers who don't know, and then also what it's on, the one that you're currently working on.
So our Paperbyte series is sort of like the easy version of white papers, right? So nobody wants to go out and read a 70-page, highly mathematical, theoretical, convoluted white paper on the tokenomic structure or the mechanism design of a new project. So our new series is the Paperbyte, where we do the research for you and we publish a very miniature-sized, readable, digestible article that covers basically everything that one of these protocols covered in their white paper. And right now I'm writing one on the Terra ecosystem or the Luna ecosystem, which is a very big ecosystem, and it's taking me a lot longer to research than I had originally planned. But that's how these things goes, especially when pretty much everything you research in this asset class is new to your skill set. So as of right now, I'm kind of learning more about how their treasury system works, how it compares to other treasury systems. And I'm trying to relate it as best as possible to at least my traditional understanding of a treasury system. That way you guys can understand also how a traditional treasury system works and how an algorithmic cryptocurrency treasury system could work. So that's where I'm at right now. I should be done here pretty soon. Likely going to go out next week. Monday, though, however, we'll definitely have the Monday market outlook, where I will deep dive into all things finance, all things economics, all things Bitcoin, all things altcoins, based off of what I've been seeing, what I've been reading, and what I think is going to happen next. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I got one question for you, and I think I'm going to make this a staple for our podcast. And I haven't told Calvin what the question is, so he has no idea. And I also just thought of it 5 seconds ago. But Calvin, I think I'm going to ask this once a week. What do you think? What do you think for this next week? Up or down?
Oh, are you kidding me? Oh, this is going to be good because I'm going to get it wrong 95% of the time.
And we'll keep a tally.
Oh my God. The amount of times Calvin's been wrong. Ah, dude. Okay, hang on. Let me.
You don't even have to. You don't even
let me
have
look
to
at.
explain why. Just give me a up or down.
Hey, well, I want to make a semi-educated guess in the 5 minutes that you gave me, and I'm thinking in the next week.
So today is Sunday, but today's still the end of Saturday. Starting from Sunday to next Sunday, do you think it's going to be a red week or a green week?
I'm gonna say green.
Calvin says green. I'm gonna go ahead and say green as well. Up only it is from the
Up
TCD
only,
boys.
which guarantees will plummet another 50. I'm almost positive.
Which basically means 3,000 Bitcoin by Friday.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
I think that wraps up. I got to pick your brain as much as I want to pick your brain. I definitely didn't want to get too much into the market specifics because I want to save that juicy stuff for the Monday market outlook.
Alrighty,
Perfect.
dude. Well, thanks for the chat. We'll talk next week. Yeah.
Yep. I'll see you then. Have a good one.
All right. See you. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you have any questions or concerns, make sure you leave a comment in the comments below. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/thecryptodrip. Also, remember, you can support the Crypto Drip as we move from a centralized content network to a decentralized DAO by going to thecryptodrip.com/join and make sure you subscribe. For $10 a month, you can get access to Monday market outlooks, as well as our unique Paperbyte series where we break down white papers into digestible paper bites. All right, I think that's it. Until next week, keep that brew hot.